so many of them. Oh my gosh, I had so much fun creating a talk today. I'll put them over here for now, but I think I'm going to use them. So just to give you a hint of what the books I have are, this is Mind Magic, which is by neuroscientist James Doty, MD, who wrote a really fun book called Into the Magic Shop. So this is Meditations with Meister Eckhart, who's one of my favorites. And he kind of started the ball rolling for me when he said, the seed of God grows into God. So the seed of who you are grows into who you are. And that reminded me also of my dear friend Emily Cady. Emily Cady wrote what book? Yes, we just had a whole class on it. Lessons in Truth. Lessons in Truth. She also wrote a book called How I Use Truth, which was after Lessons in Truth. Emily Cady was a homeopath who lived in the late 1800s. She wrote Lessons in Truth in like 1889, and she wrote How I Use Truth in about 1913. She was writing articles for Unity magazine. I'm going to use this. And then this other little tiny book, which I found in the library. We have an amazing library, and the door is always open. You're welcome to go in there. There's an area where you can just borrow books, and then there are a ton of books that you can purchase. And we are not, publishers, clearinghouse. You could give us $2 for a book. You could give us $5 for a book. Whatever it is that you have that you want to give to the church and take a book, we'd love to have you have the book. There's a whole sneaky section that I discovered. It's sneaky because there was stuff in front of it. And these are all these little tiny books that are old Unity books, and I love them. This particular one is called Prove Me Now. And it's not written by a Unity minister. It's written by a man who was he was a screenwriter. He wrote movies. And basically, in most of his life, he was writing. That was his thing. He also was like an automobile executive or something. But he published things in Unity magazine, articles in Unity magazine that became this book, Prove Me Now. So let's see if I got all the books. Yes. Okay, you've got the overview here. So when I created the idea for this lesson, I had a different thing going on in my mind. We've been talking a lot about how we evolve and grow in consciousness, and how we basically are like a seed that gets planted and we grow, we blossom. Sometimes some of us are like lotus plants that are down in the mud, and we spend a lot of time there in the mud, but eventually the light shines and we move up and we begin to blossom. And so when I created this particular talk title, which is Bloom Where You're Planted, Celebrating Your Unique Gifts, I thought it would be more about what are our spiritual gifts, like individual things that we carry through and show up with in the world. But the more I began focusing on this lesson, the more I realized there was a much more fundamental lesson that I think it's the basis of what Unity teaches us, and I think it's also the basis of the thing that most of us live our lives trying to learn, but constantly forgetting, which is who we are, like the nature of who we are. And so a lot of different kind of ideas popped into my mind, and one of the things that I remembered was I used to work for Unity Church in Palo Alto, and I would create these big programs for them, 7-week programs. And one of the programs we created was called Powerful Beyond Measure. And it was based on a book by Deepak Chopra, which was called The 7 Spiritual Laws of Success. A lot of you might remember that book. Powerful Beyond Measure is a quote that some people thought came from Nelson Mandela, but in fact I researched, it came from Marianne Williamson. And most of us know who Marianne Williamson is. She's basically majorly a teacher in the Course in Miracles. She actually was held a ministerial role at a big Unity church in Michigan for a number of years. So she's very linked into Unity teachings, not to mention being a presidential candidate, which is, an element of the power that she carries. But she had this quote, and many of you may remember this. It was, "Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, which most frightens us." Our deepest fear is not that we're inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, which most frightens us. And it was interesting for me to kind of reflect back on doing this program it was in the 90s in Palo Alto. That was the quote we used, but the book we used was all about spiritual laws. And I realized if we don't get the basic truth of who we are, we can't use those laws. The laws actually come after. We have to know who we are. We have to know about the light that we are before we actually can apply these principles that are the laws that we're talking about. Something like, what's one of the laws of unity that we all know? The law of mind action, right? Thoughts and mind produce after their kind. Similar, it's kind of like a karmic thing. It's kind of like, if I bounce this ball, it's going to come back up. What I'm holding in consciousness is going to be pictured out in the world. But if we don't know who we are, and if we don't embrace the truth of who we are, what are we going to get? Garbage in, garbage out, right? That we're going to let that fear can overrun us. So it's a very powerful thing to think that the unique gift that each of us carries is not about whether you're good at music, or whether I can stand up here and speak, or whether somebody's a really good cook or a writer or a poet or, can fix cars or whatever. That's not the unique gift. The unique gift is the divine presence, the living Christ Spirit, the holy presence, the Buddha nature, the fullness of who you are. This is the unique gift. And for most of us, it doesn't easily come to us, and we don't own it on a regular basis in our life. Am I talking to the right people? Yeah, it's pretty amazing. So I wanted to share some different things with you. Well, I've already shared wonderful Meister Eckhart. And, more specifically, it's this is from Matthew Fox, his meditations on Meister Eckhart. The seed of God is in us. Now, the seed of a pear tree grows into a pear tree. And the hazel seed grows into a hazel tree. A seed of God grows into God. So who's a seed of God? What's a seed of God? You're a seed of God. We're all a seed of God. And this is the teaching that Jesus came to give us. The Father that he carried, the Father, everything comes through the Father to him, and that all that he has is in us. And so, I was thinking a little bit about that because, more fundamental churches will talk about, have you taken Jesus Christ into your heart? Are you saved by Jesus? And I realized I've always kind of had a little resistance to that because it felt like it was about the man, and that was never kind of what felt true for me at all. But the more I read these old books, these old writers, and they talk about talking about carrying that energy of Jesus, it's about owning the divine Christed nature of who we are. Jesus, the Christ. Jesus who fully embodied all the divine natures of the Holy One. Call it Source, call it God, call it whatever you want to call it. Because I know everybody, having done a class, I know people have their own way of interpreting. Call it light. something greater than who we as individual beings are, but that indwells all of us all the time. We say it, don't we? There's only one presence and one power. Active in my life and in the universe, God the good, in all and through all and over all. We carry that energy all the time. So I wanted to share a little bit from some of these writers and actually, hopefully, weave it in to Jim Doty's book about manifestation, because essentially we're called to manifest these qualities, aren't we? We're not called necessarily to manifest in the sense of like, oh, I want a certain kind of car, or I want a certain amount of money, but we're called to manifest these qualities of the divine, which Charles Fillmore would call our 12 powers: quality of faith and imagination, quality of spiritual understanding and will, the quality of enthusiasm or zeal, and the power that we have to speak the power of the word, the power of love and wisdom, which connect us at the level of the heart, and the power of divine order and spiritual persistence or strength, and the power of saying yes to life and saying no to that which no longer serves us. All of these are literally qualities of the Christ nature within all of us. And it's not that we have one and don't have the other, but as we uniquely embody these gifts, the seed of God grows into God, the seed of God within each one of us. We uniquely weave these various qualities into what becomes our life and how we show up in the world and how we manifest in the world. Always being mindful that our manifestation is for the benefit of all life. We're not manifesting for ourselves. We're manifesting for the greater good because we're being called to carry forward this divine essence of who we are, to bring it out into the world. So I want to share a few quotes that I really resonated with. A few of these are from Emily Cady, and being mindful, her language is late 1800s, early 1900s. She was very versed in the Bible, but she was a healer. I mean, she was a homeopath, so she was helping people with things in the physical body. But she also helped people with psychological issues because she was, in a sense, like a spiritual counselor as well. So she says, it's a matter of trusting the Christ within, the living Christ presence, the divine nature of who you are, to do all things for us, realizing that we are one with the Christ within, and that to the Christ within is given all power. It's not something that comes to any of us spontaneously. It comes by persistent effort on our part. This, I think, is an important thing for us to be aware of. Maybe when we were first born, we got it. You know, we can see it in little kids, but over time, things get worn away, this awareness of who we are with our culture, with the norms of the community that we live in. She was very clear in her writings, and again, this is her later writing. She had written Lessons in Truth, but this was after she was working the principles that she called forth in Lessons in Truth in her own life experience. And she said, it takes work, it takes effort for us to realize the nature of who we are, the Christ within, who we are. We begin by determining that we will trust the Christ within as our present deliverance, as our health, as our riches, our wisdom, our all. And we keep on by labored effort until we form a kind of spiritual habit. No habit births forth into our life, but everyone comes from a succession of little acts. So just think about that in your own life. You know, maybe you have a habit of sitting in the stillness. Maybe you have a habit, like Sue mentioned, of reading the daily word every morning. Or maybe there's a spiritual book that you pull out and read on occasions. It kind of keeps you in the field. Maybe just coming to church on Sunday is part of that habit where you begin to really anchor in your awareness of the Christ presence, the divine nature of who you are. She goes on to say, had any person, any true conception of the gift of God given to him, nothing in the created world would be able to withstand that power. We speak of a person's gift without realizing how truly we are speaking. We say, she's gifted in this direction or that direction, as though she were in possession by some nature of some remarkable ability inherited from parents or created by a peculiar environment. While many of us are ready to acknowledge in a general way that every good gift and every perfect gift is from above and coming down from the divine presence of light, the Father of light, the source of all, even we are not prepared for the reception of the marvelous gift of our endowment from Source. When a glimpse of it comes, it takes one almost breathless with wonder and astonishment. Have you ever felt that when it just kind of comes to you? The power and the presence that indwells us? It's an amazing experience. To have created man thus seemed wise to infinite wisdom, and the one subject to this life should be with us as it must be in the mind of God. To make the one object in this life should be with us as it must be in the mind of God. And that object is to make manifest this Christ light or this Christ consciousness. Unto each one of us was the grace given, the grace being the power, the love, the wisdom, the strength, the sustenance, according to the measure of the gift of the divine presence and the awareness and the consciousness of that presence within each one of us. This wonderful teacher who was a screenwriter, Gardner Hunting, this very beginning of this book, I found it so interesting. The very first chapter, because he's not a minister, so he's not humping on Christ and Jesus and talking about things that I'm talking about all the time, but because that's not his language, and that's not who he's speaking to. But what he's talking about, and he's a student of truth. He's a unity student. He understands metaphysics, that we live from the inside out. What he's talking about in this very first chapter is how all the spiritual traditions that he is part of teach the same thing that the psychological news is all about. And this was in the 50s. And he's talking very specifically about how we get caught up in the subconscious. And those of you, if you kind of remember, I've talked about this before in Emily Cady, how in Unity there's this awareness of the conscious mind, that we can become aware of the things that are around us with our conscious mind. And there's the subconscious mind that is, or some would call it unconscious, maybe more the psychologists would call it unconscious mind, of the things that we're not necessarily consciously aware of, but are programs and habits that are running our thought process, things that happened to us in the past, maybe traumatic experiences that we've had, things that we have put in our memory bank, but maybe we're not actively thinking about them right now, that we can pull things up from that subconscious. Unity also tells us that there is another level of consciousness, which is the superconscious, they call it, or basically the presence of the divine. We could call that the Christ consciousness, the divine nature, and that we have a capacity at any time to pivot our thinking. We can either use from the conscious mind, we can pull up those things that are coming from the subconscious mind, some of which are just knee-jerk and habit for us, or we can draw our attention to the higher consciousness, the superconscious mind, those things of our divine nature, that we literally have this choice. And what he's talking about in the first part of this book is, there's no difference really between the teachings that Unity is giving around these different awareness of consciousness that we have, and what psychologists are doing, where you might go into, anybody here who's ever gone to therapy, they're digging up. I mean, my experience was a lot of digging of things that had happened in the past so that I could see what they are and see, oh, well, that's not running, doesn't need to run my life right now. It might be running my life, but it doesn't need to run my life if I can be more aware of it. So it's very interesting to kind of look at some of these older teachings, and we can, we could spend all of our time here at Unity looking at some of the current books on neuroscience and what's happening with the brain, and we'd find that a lot of the things that they're telling us are things that Charles Filmer talked about 100 years ago, Emily Cady talked about, that the people in India have known for thousands of years. But we're just discovering it, and we call it scientific. And so our mind thinks we should believe it more than maybe what somebody said in a book 100 years ago. But it's all the same. It's all the same teachings. And people are waking up to this in a very powerful way. And I think it's really important for us to begin to understand this. I wanted to read a little bit from this guy because I really liked him, Gardner. He says, the Bible says God has told us that his name is I am. God says, be still and know that I am God. And we're told, in him we live and move and have our being. As I put these two revelations together, I get a glimpse of great truth that I never comprehended before. Virtually, God tells us, I am the Spirit indwelling in you. You are all that I am. Get still and realize that because I am, you are. Get still and realize that because I am, you are. And that without me, you would not be. I am all there is, from the nearest electron to the farthest star. He goes on to say, all I have to do is to get still, stop worrying, stop fussing, stop borrowing trouble and thinking about tomorrow, and grasp the perfectly obvious fact that I am now alive because infinite spirit is alive in me. Would that we could stop fussing, stop thinking about tomorrow. Would that we could. Would that we could. That without this spirit alive in me, I should not be alive at all. That consequently, all that is good or can be good in my life comes from this spirit. And that the simple, easy, obvious way for me to secure all my good is to let this spirit have complete control of me and all my affairs. Thy will be done. Non-resistance and cooperation. The thing that's been so fun for me as I've been kind of looking back at some of these old teachings and also listening and reading Jim Doty's book is that one of the main things that the old teachers are saying and that the neuroscientists are saying is we need to learn to be still. We need to learn to relax the body. That if we can't learn to relax the body, we can't ever get out of these loops that have been created through the brain that pull up old traumatic experiences. Our brains basically are hardwired to fight or flight. While evolution has happened for thousands of years, our own environments have changed over a relatively short time. We used to be in small communities hunter-gathering, and our brains were wired to fight the tiger. We were wired to protect ourselves from the tribe that lived on the other side of the hill. And so this hard wiring of the brain is hardwired to a fight or flight mechanism within our systems. And what happens with this fight or flight mechanism is it releases all sorts of basically toxins into our physical body. I am not going to go into all the science of it, but it's very fascinating when you start to see the different areas of the brain that they now can identify, and to see how important it is for us not to get hijacked by this fight or flight, basically automatic mechanism inside our physical bodies, because we do have these physical bodies this time. You know, he was using an example. He said, you could get an email from somebody that was kind of snarky, you know, and you react as if a tiger had attacked you. And this is what's going on in I have to say, this is so important for us because this is what's happening in our culture right now. Our brains are being hijacked by these constant threats of change that are happening in the outer. I mean, it's been happening over time, but right now we've got like an onslaught of this going on. And if we allow ourselves to think it's the tiger, and allow ourselves to really let those hormones and those neurotransmitters come and hijack us, they're causing inflammation in the physical body. They're not allowing us to slow down. They're activating what's known as the sympathetic nervous system, which is the fight, flight, or freeze mechanism, and it's a very fast kind of thing that happens. As opposed to when we can relax, physically relax, when we take that time to meditate, we take time to breathe, we're releasing different neurotransmitters in the body. We're bringing serotonin, we're bringing endorphins into our body, we're bringing oxytocin into our body. We're releasing all those things that cause inflammation in the body, and we're allowing ourselves to move into a place that's not fight or flight, it's a place of rest and relaxation. They call it rest and digest. And it's so important that we do this in our lives right now, especially, I don't care if you're a Unity student or who you are, but it's the only way we're going to be able to move through the kind of what feels like tiger threat that's in our world right now, and begin to operate from that Christ nature of who we are, the divine presence, that knows that it's love, that knows that it's wisdom, that knows that the divine power we have is within each one of us to co-create and to manifest for the benefit of all beings. It starts with our ability to calm ourselves down, to relax. And this book here, The Neuroscience of Manifestation and How It Changes Everything, I would not call this a spiritual book per se, but at the end of the book he talks about walking through his home, and he said one of the keynotes in his home is a great big sculpture of a Buddha without a head. And the whole idea is how our thinking nature can really kind of hijack us from the truth of who we are. He doesn't claim to be any particular spiritual anything, but as you read the book, you understand that he knows there's something greater than that small self, and it's all about connecting to this within ourselves. So there's so many more things I'd love to talk about, but I'd like to read a poem that really anchors for me this idea of the seed of God is the seed that's in each one of us, this Christ nature, the Christ presence within each one of us, and the perfection and beauty that it is. Just take a moment, close your eyes and listen to this. It's by a man named Frank Stanton. There is nothing to fear. You're as good as the best, as strong as the mightiest, too. You can win in every battle or test, for there's no one just like you. There's only one you in the world today, so nobody else, you see, can do your work in as fine a way. You're the only you there'll be. So face the world, and all life is yours to conquer and love and live. And you'll find the happiness that endures in just the measure you give. There's nothing too good for you to possess, nor heights where you cannot go. Your power is more than belief or guess. It's something you just have to know. There's nothing to fear. You can and you will, for you're the invincible you. So set your foot on the highest hill. There's nothing you cannot do. Just powerful, powerful you, the seed of God. But we need to own that by practicing our principles and by taking the time in our life to calm the busyness of what's going on in the outer, not allow it to really hijack us, not allow it to pull us away from the truth in the center of who we are. And the best way we can do that is through the power of the breath. Don't even have to go into a guided meditation or anything. And I know there's some of you who are doing some powerful meditation work. But it's one of the main things that Unity has gifted us with, is this ability to be in the stillness and be in the silence. So I'm going to ask us to do a meditation right now. So thank you, Jeanette. Tommy, turning down the lights. Sure, if you want to. Yeah, sure. It's always good, Guy. Thank you so much. So I want you to experiment a little bit with your breath just for a moment. And begin first and take a few deep inhalations and exhalations through your nose, if you're comfortable. And just notice as you slow down that exhalation that you begin to feel more relaxed. And take one more breath in and out through the nose. And now try exhaling through your mouth. So inhale through the nose and exhale through the mouth. And notice the level of your relaxation. Is it different? Just make a note for yourself. If you feel more relaxed when you're exhaling through your mouth than when you exhale and inhale through your nose. And just gently now relax in the body, choosing whatever breath practice feels easy and no stress. Taking in a deep and a conscious breath. Imagine yourself in a quiet place. It could be a comfortable chair that you have at home. It could be a quiet garden, someplace that's familiar to you, or something in your imagination where you can feel restful and peaceful. Take another nice deep and conscious breath. And in your mind's eye, imagine a beautiful flower. See the color of that flower, maybe even become aware of the name of the flower, something that you see in your garden or in the world. Become aware of the fragility of the flower and all that it took from seed to blossom or bulb to blossom. Notice its leaves or thorns, the stem. Notice the petals of the flower. Become aware of the texture. Perhaps even imagine feeling those petals. And become aware of the earth and the roots beneath the ground that support the flower, perhaps as it sits in an array of other flowers in a garden, or perhaps all by itself. Become aware of the sunshine, the light, the moisture that nourishes. And feel grateful for the beauty, the grace of the flower that you can enjoy, that others can enjoy, perhaps with the aroma, the scent, certainly with our eyes. This flower is you. It has blossomed from deep, deep, deep within. From the truth of who you are. From that living Christed spirit, the divine nature, the holiness, the wholeness of who you are as love, as joy, as peace and grace, as strength and power. You didn't force this flower, you nurtured it. You allowed the seed of God to grow in you. And now in this sacred moment, in the stillness, feel the fullness of who you are. Feel the joy of being who you are. Fully and divinely you. And gently affirm to yourself, I celebrate the divine light, the living Christ nature within me. I bloom where I am planted. And I shine the light that is mine to give for all the world to be blessed. And so it is. And gently, as you feel ready, take another deep and a conscious breath, feeling the blessing of the breath in the body, relaxing more deeply into this moment. And as you're ready, you can gently open your eyes, come back to this room. We're going to have some music. Thank you, Jeanette.